Today we're going to talk with Gordon Mackenzie, who moved to Nipigon a few years ago and got involved with the Boy Scouts. And so our main focus today is talking about the Boy Scout camp that they acquired at Pine Portage. But Gordon will give us some background on that.
Okay, thanks, Glenna. Yes, myself and my family moved to Nipigon in December of 1987 when I was employed with Domtar Woodlands in Red Rock. I became involved with the scouting movement in about 1990, and the club leaders at that time were Paul Nanskerville and Bill Harmon, and then myself. So I was involved with the scouting movement from about 1990 to 2004, 2005, and had a really great experience with the youth. Now, as far as Pine Portage goes, Pine Portage, the Camp Pine Portage is located on a peninsula about a mile from the existing Pine Portage Dam, and that camp was owned by the Abitibi Company, a logging company, and that camp was used primarily for the river drive. Now there were 3 buildings on that camp. There was a dormitory that held about between 30 and 40 men, or whoever, and then there was the cookery, which had a kitchen and the sleeping quarters for the kitchen staff. And the 3rd building was, I called it the foreman's quarters, was kind of an office structure with, again, sleeping quarters in the back. Now, when the river drive was concluding on the Nipigon River, Jerry Rhodes, the scoutmaster at that time, that would have been in the early 70s, I guess he approached Abitibi and said, well, what are you guys going to do with this camp? And because he was quite interested in perhaps acquiring it. So they had an amicable agreement where Abitibi basically gave the camp and the land use permit over to Scouts Canada, or Boy Scouts of Canada as it was called at that time. Now, it's very interesting because the lands and forests at that time, they were not very receptive to that camp being handed over to Scouts Canada. And there was quite a bit of toing and froing. I read some of the literature, and our former member of provincial parliament, Jack Stokes, got involved. And I remember reading the letter, and the letter is actually here in the museum somewhere, where he very forcefully said that the ministry was going to let Scouts Canada, or Boy Scouts of Canada, acquire that property under a land use permit. And by the G, they got it. And the Scouts were very happy at that time, because you can appreciate the Pine Portage is about 45 kilometers from here. So it's at a relatively remote location. It's on Forgan Lake, so there's a water body there. There's trees and all the natural environment, and it just blended in perfectly with what the scouting movement was doing.
Do you think there was a time, like a limit? Was there so many years to that agreement, Gordon?
No, it was actually
ongoing,
it was ongoing, and the land use permit cost that much money. They actually waived the fee for the land use permit. In later years, when I got involved with the camp, there was a modest fee, and then by the time 2004, 2005 came in, unorganized townships were getting penalized even heavier, so the rates went up even higher. So so it's a really good story. I mean, the camp was in pretty good shape. It was sound structurally. You can appreciate, like, if it rained, during a scouting event, that there was a safe place to go and a safe place to sleep. There was a fire pit there as well, so you could have open fires, and it was grand, actually. So.
And it was big enough you could hold events inside that building.
Oh yes, yeah. And we used it. When I was involved, we used the first Saturday in June. We went up for a 3-day weekend, and it involved swimming, canoeing, planting trees, that type of thing. And in the wintertime, we actually used it in the wintertime as well. We would go up the weekend ahead of time and snowshoe in to make sure the trail was packed. And then we had a lot of the fathers and parents would come along with their snow machines, and we had the youth snowshoe in. But if there was anyone running into trouble, at least we had a snow machine to back it up. So I remember one instance there. We part of the scouting movement is to be prepared, and I remember we were going on a winter outing, and one of the young fellows come up and he just had his running shoes on. And I said to him, I said, we're going up to Pine Portage and it's pretty cold up there in the winter. And I said, I'm going to have to actually deny you coming unless you go home and change your boots. Well, he didn't really want to do that, but his father overheard what I said, and sure enough, he went home and changed his into something more appropriate.
So were there other special things that you did up there? I mean, you went just camping, but I mean,
Yeah.
Was there badges that the boys could earn by going there?
Oh yeah, there were outdoor badges that they could earn. Another thing, talking about interesting things that happened up there. Hans Sauerman used to work for Ontario Power Generation, and that Pine Portage Dam itself. I would arrange with him and their management team to bring the youth in, and it was quite something. If you've ever been through that dam,
Yeah.
it's you can feel the power and the generation there. And then if you walk underneath the tunnels there, they're like ninja tunnels, and they're kind of damp and they're dripping. And I had one little fella in particular. He couldn't even get into the building because you could feel the aura of that electricity. So that we were very fortunate with that. And I think Tiny was his boss at the time. I don't know his official name. And then another time we were walking down from Pine Portage camp itself down to the dam, and a fighter plane flew overhead, and it was flying at low level. It must have been an F-18 or something like that, and they must have been doing some practicing over the dam itself, and it was so loud that you could hardly, it almost burst your eardrums.
Wow!
But there was a lot of little things like that would happen, and we had a lot of support from the parents, and we tried to have like a 2-to-1 ratio when we were camping. So that was we really enjoyed it.
My recollection is going canoeing there, Gordon, and going out, and all those cut off trees were under the water, so you could float in your canoe on top of them.
Right.
And that, because I always remember hearing how they cut the trees there to flood that.
Right.
And it was really interesting. That sticks in my mind of looking in the water, clear as anything.
Yes.
And you could see all those trees cut there.
Yes, it was beautiful. And if you went a little further in the peninsula itself, there was the bays where they had put the ships for the river drive, so they were still intact. And there was actually a little cabin at the far end of the bay that you could go into. So
Right.
it was. You could feel the history when you were there.
So was it just Scouts, or did you have Cubs go there too?
Well, Scouts initially with Jerry Rhodes and that crew, and then with Bill Harmon and Paul Nanskerville and myself, we had the Cubs go up there, and then myself later on, I would bring the Cubs up, and then my wife Karen, she was looking after the Beaver group, and sometimes either on the Saturday afternoon or the Sunday afternoon, the Beaver group would also come up. So they had a chance, to see what Pine Portage was like
Right.
before they actually came into the cubbing movement and then stayed overnight themselves.
I remember Jerry Rhodes taking our grade 8 class there.
Oh.
They couldn't go on a class trip anywhere, but I took the girls to the Polly Lake one, and he
Okay.
took the boys to the Boy Scout one.
Okay.
It was very nice because we
Yeah.
both had outdoor experiences
Yeah.
with camping. Because
Right.
lots of kids don't camp, or they didn't camp in
Right.
those days.
Yeah.
Not that way.
And a lot of children didn't have the opportunity. I know there's other activities in town like hockey and things like that. But I know with the cubbing movement, it was relatively inexpensive to join, right? And we always said that if a youth couldn't afford to join, that we wouldn't worry about that,
Right.
because we did fundraising, and the fundraising would help out.
Can you have a recollection of numbers in those days, Gordon?
We when I was cub leader, we had approximately 21, 22 youth, and then it diminished to about a dozen by about 2004, and yeah, so it. I know there were larger
in the
numbers.
heyday, there was a lot of.
In the heyday, well, yes, you
Yeah.
can. I remember talking to people like Jimmy McCullough, who was a cub at
Yeah.
one time, and
Yeah.
people like that, and they really had a real strong connection. It gives you a good connection to the land, right?
Right,
Yeah.
for sure. No, it was an awesome place to go because you say it was not too far away, but it was really remote.
It was.
When you got there. You
Yeah.
felt that remoteness
Yes,
up
yeah.
there. And I remember Bill Locker coming because
Okay.
his wife was a guider, and he would take us on tours
Okay.
all around the bottom there of,
Right.
of that area.
Yeah.
But a pretty interesting place. Now, the sad part of what happened to it.
Yeah, after 2004, we really didn't have an active scouting movement. So the Ministry of Natural Resources at that time, they approached me and said, well, if you're not actually using it for that particular purpose, we're looking at closing it. So there is an older age group like rovers. I'm not exactly sure the age, but I know it's 19 to 24 or something. And I said, well, what if we started a rover group? Could we keep the camp open? And they indicated yes. So we were getting the paperwork. My wife and I were getting the paperwork ready for that. And then we got a summons, and the ministry asked us to meet them up at the camp. And they brought in a public health inspector, and it's a remote camp. It's a camp. It's not it's not.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. It had its drawbacks, but I mean, in order to keep the camp alive, the health unit and the ministry were indicating that major repairs had to be done. And I'll never forget. I guess I'm a little bit of a disturber there, but they were complaining about lead paint on the walls and that type of thing. And I said, in the 14 years that I've been a Cub Master, I said, I never saw one child lick a wall. So, I mean, it was just sad that had to happen. And eventually, well, we had to, vacate the buildings of any glass. Like, we had to take out all the windows and any of the metal that was inside, and then the ministry sent out a crew to demolish and burn the buildings. So it's too bad, because it was so accessible, and I don't know, the youth now. I have a real thing in my heart for youth, and when you put even further barriers up to outdoor activity, it's hard, really hard.
And you're right, the barriers are, because you've been to the Polly Lake Girl Guide Camp, and we decided it's always cold when you swim, so we would put a sauna, because we had a building there. Well, Toronto never heard of a sauna. It lasted like 2 years, and then they shut it down because it was totally unsafe.
Yeah.
Because they had no idea what it was, but it provided that warmth that
Yeah.
you needed sometimes when you were camping. Eh?
Right.
So you're right, the red tape spoils lots of outdoor things.
So I really do appreciate all the work that Jerry Rhodes did and Jack Stokes did, and making sure that opportunity was there for the youth. I mean, to me, they were real, true visionaries. They could see 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road.
Right.
So, so Pine Portage for me it still holds a lot of very special memories, and I remember even when we were having breakfast in the morning, we often had a large breakfast, bacon and eggs and toast and pancakes and coffee and juice and all. It was a really substantial breakfast. And one cub in particular there, he was so hungry, he started eating his bacon really quickly, and all of a sudden I heard this, Akela, come quick, somebody's choking. So I raced into the kitchen there, and sure enough, there was somebody choking. And so I took him outside, and I was able to dislodge the bacon. And I dodged that one and came back in. Not 5 minutes later, the same boy was choking on some bacon, and I had to do the same thing again. So I mean, there's a lot of interesting, funny stuff that happened. I know a couple of cubs there who went on, with their careers. One cub in particular, I'll never forget, we had Chris Leal. He was a forester for the Ministry of Natural Resources, and he came out and he did a walk with us. So we walked from Pine Portage Camp down to the dam, and all along the way, Chris described, the trees, the forest, and the fauna, and gave descriptions and, Latin names and, common names, that type of thing. So it was pretty interesting. So on the way back, we had a little quiz, and one little guy there, he was able to repeat almost verbatim what Chris had said. I mean, this, populous dilatoides, or Picea bax, Pinus, whatever, all the Latin names, and he could repeat them right back, and the common names. It was truly amazing. So that,
There's always some little thing that will stick in the minds of all those kids who went there.
yeah,
Whether it be funny or it be a learning experience.
yeah,
Or
yeah.
a trip that you had. It's
Yeah.
pretty important to have those things, and unfortunate they're not there now.
No, there's
No.
there's fewer of those opportunities. So, yeah.
That's good.
Okay.
Yes, pretty interesting because it was a popular place for that short a time.
It was, yeah, it was really.
Right. Okay.
And we planted a lot of trees there too. So,
Yes.
and it was good. We could go back year after year, and I would put ribbons on them, and so the boys would see the growth and that type of
I
thing.
don't know if you knew that Herman's the one that built the Biffy out there.
Oh, I do. As a matter of fact, that Biffy stood the test of time. When all the other buildings were down, guess what still was the last Biffy standing?
Ted was on the crew that had to go there and demolish that, and he
Okay.
came back and said, "Dad's Biffy is still standing there."
Yeah, no, it was very significant. Oh, yeah.
It was good. We're just going to do another second little talk with Gordon, just in general, about some of the Scout and Cub activities that took place in Nipigon in that era.
Right. Okay. When we finished there, I was talking about the Christmas time. So Christmas parties would happen, and we would, at that time, we'd bring in the beavers and the cubs all together. So you can imagine, and all their parents, and we asked the parents to bring a gift for their child, something less than $10. And then Dave Thompson would dress up as Santa, and I believe Dave Thompson's father used to dress up as Santa. And I'll never forget the first time he was Santa, because I guess I must have been a little bit of a nervous leader. So I was trying to, get the children in and out rather quickly. And then Dave just kind of turned to me at that one point and he said, I'm not quite finished. So he kind of put me in my place there, which was good. So he spent quality time with the youth there. I know with the cubbing age, it's 8, 9, and 10, and I really enjoyed that, because if I said, "Okay, guys, tonight we're going to all ride our bicycles down to the arena," everyone brought their bicycles and we all rode our bikes down to the arena. And then I would ask, well, who wants to go tree planting? And they would go tree planting. And there is an interesting story. Kevin Belanger used to be the Woodlands manager at Domtar Red Rock, and I had asked him at one time for a donation. And he said to me, well, times are pretty tough. I can't give you a donation. And I said to him, well, what if we planted trees? Would you pay us to plant trees? And he said, hey, that's a good idea. So he gave me a contract for 3,000 trees. And we went out to Cache Creek, and we planted 3,000 trees, and we got paid for it. And of course, a lot of the parents of these youth were forestry workers and avid tree planters, so we were able to get them to help out as well.
So tell about the Halloween then. You were commenting about the parties at Halloween.
Yeah, and Halloween, that's mainly concerning with, we'd have the party upstairs, and they were very well received. And then we would go down to the Legion downstairs. Was this recorded before? Maybe not.
No.
Okay, so we'd have our party upstairs, and it was upstairs in the Legion. And Legion were great sponsors. And then I would bring all the youth downstairs, down the stairs into the club room, and we would actually parade around in the club room, which during those times was packed. So all the patrons, of course, they just loved that. And then as we went by the bar, the person at the bar, I believe it was Miriam Price at the time, she would grab a candy bar, or she would grab a bag of chips or something, and everyone got something. And of course the patrons were all clapping and hooting and hollering, and it was a really enjoyable time. Other activities that we did, of course, besides the tree planting, we did a lot of outdoor hiking, and I had kind of a 3-year rotation, because the boys are 8, 9, and 10. So I did kind of the similar, like I did 3 years of something, and then I kind of more or less repeated the same thing, but they wouldn't get, if you were in the organization for 3 years, Well, in your third year, you wouldn't get a repeat, you know.
Right.
And then I invited people that harvested furs, trappers and that, and Murray Monk and Bill Watson in particular. They seen that part of our opening ceremonies had a wolf head. And I guess Murray Monk or somebody noticed that there wasn't an actual wolf head, eh? So they said, would you like us to get you a wolf head? And I said, well, that would be very nice. And you know, those fellows went out and trapped a large wolf. They had it taxidermied. It cost well over, I think it was $500 at the time. And they donated that wolf head in 1995, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, they were really good, and they came in. Of course, they showed the youth the furs, what the difference between a marten and an otter and a mink, and you know it was really interesting. And we had Ron Running. I think he was the former district manager. He came by, and he's an archery enthusiast. So you know we had things like that that were quite interesting for the boys. Every
And of course, one of the big things every year was the banquet.
Oh yeah.
We always had a father and son banquet, and
Yeah.
the girls had mother and daughter. But
Yeah.
always a big thing then.
Yeah, and towards the end, of course, the scouting became, you know, you would have male and female
Yes.
persons, right? And we did have Sarah Hardy was a cub leader for a little while, and there was a girl from Finland, an exchange student, that she also became a cub leader, assistant cub leader, and they were here for 1 or 2 years, and yeah, so you know we you know, and I know when went up to Pine Portage in particular, you know, they had their own place in the cookery. You know, there was 2 rooms in the back of the cookery, so that's where they stayed. But we really appreciated their efforts, you know.
Okay. That's too bad. The Cubs and Scouts were such an active movement, and then gradually died off when electronics came along, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of both parents working and that type of thing, and people live very busy lives. But for me, it wasn't a job at all. I enjoyed every second of it, really.
Good.
So
Okay. Thank
thanks.
you very much. That just adds a little bit to
Yeah,
our
okay.
information.